Welcome to another episode of Breaking Down Designs. In this series, I'll look at a variety of different characters from different media and try to piece together what the artist wanted to convey with the characters in terms of their personality and playstyle. For this episode, I picked Sojourn, Emre, and Cassidy from Overwatch. I picked these three because I think lots of their designs are trying to convey a very similar idea. Firstly, they're all in the damage role, and quite a few of the aspects of their designs do overlap, so I just decided to clump them together because I would be repeating myself if I separated them in different videos. To start, all these characters are taller than average and quite athletic, so you'd assume they'd be a bit more physically resilient, more intimidating, and generally more aggressive without being overly bulky like a tank. Also, if you think I maybe got something wrong or you'd like to weigh in, feel free to leave something in the comments. Critiques and criticisms are welcome. For the first of the three, we'll look at Sojourn, starting off with her color palette. I would make the case that Sojourn's skin tone is also part of her palette, which adds to the other earthy tone in her scheme, that other tone being a more pale cream color on her torso. She also has a decent amount of white within her color scheme, which her hair also contributes to. Sojourn is actually 51 years old, and honestly, she seems to be holding together pretty well, but granted she is a cyborg, who knows what that does to her body. She has a reflective dark steel on parts of her attire, as well as it's the material that makes up the joints of her cyborg body. Then she has a very vibrant and saturated red as her main accent color that contrasts to her more mundane palette quite well. It's that really big pop that it has. She also has a sparse amount of pale blue that gets close to a turquoise at times, especially on her railgun, and within her scheme that's typically used on her tech or in her cybernetics. What lots of her scheme tells the viewer is that she's rather plain and likely rather by the books in terms of her personality, and that's basically just conveyed by the earthy tones and their lighter values. It's very much like a dirt, sand, sandstone, limestone, wood, bark color, just lots of those are very practical, reliable, but a bit boring. The contrast of the dark steel, which is really close to black, and the white in her scheme may tell us that she may see things in a rather binary fashion. She may see any choice or action made as either morally good or morally bad. Because of the whole brightness and lightness of her color palette, we would likely assume she is on the side of good. She is likely aware of the moral choices she makes and the compass she has to go along with it. I may be reaching a bit when it comes to that aspect of the color palette.
I never told you this, but I joined the agency partly because of you.
Then the red on her scheme tells the viewer that she likely has an element of danger associated with her, which makes sense since she is in the damage role. But since her scheme is only partially red and it's not the primary color, the danger is a bit more sparse, as well as most of the red is on her railgun, putting a focus there. The red is also on her jets on her back, again putting a focus there. The red is also on the maple leaf on her shoulders too. The danger she poses isn't present all the time. Imagine you swapped the cream color and the red on her scheme. It would be a very different idea being conveyed. The thing about Sojourn's red is that it's not fully red in hue. It's ever so slightly orange. The color of her tech and her railgun is almost turquoise when you look at it, which is actually a mix of green and blue, which would be a complementary color to this reddish-orange color. This turquoise color in general is typically used in design, and it's associated with futuristic tech lots of the time.
No thanks, Chum. I know how to fly just fine.
Now we'll tackle the shape, language, and physique of her character. Sojourn, like the other two I'll go over later, is primarily made of triangles. Even her gun is kind of triangular shaped with its side profile. I am kind of reaching with this one. From afar though, her hairline mixed with the decals on her forehead actually make a triangular shape, especially when you kind of squint a bit. The maple leaves on her shoulders are stylized to be groups of triangles too, right? You can see that like each third of it is a bigger triangle and then they're made up of smaller triangles. It's just basically a triangle within a triangle within a triangle. If you also couldn't tell, Sojourn doesn't just have thighs, she has whole ass tree trunks from a redwood down there. This does a couple of things. Big, strong legs are good at jumping and kicking. The more bottom-heavy silhouette also reads as quite feminine. Because this silhouette is so obviously read as feminine from afar, you look at her and you can immediately tell, oh, it's likely Sojourn and it's not a character like Emre from afar. So this helps a lot with her silhouette. She also has jets on her legs that are almost always open. Her default stance has a rather low down in a more of an agile pose, and I would say it's coiled. That's the word I'd use to describe it. It's almost like Baptiste's a bit. The shape of her legs, since they're so thick at the hips and there's a bit of a tapering down, they form somewhat of a triangular shape too. She also has harness-esque straps on her upper legs to kind of make another triangle pointing down when she stands normally. All these things point to her being associated with agility and bursts of speed. She would be maneuverable, but only for a short period of time. Alluded to because of her stance and the triangle and the red and everything, she'd have to coil down and then jump really high up, but then she'd need to coil back down again, and that takes time, so it's bursts of speed. Since she's obviously a cyborg and that she has lots of her body exposed, you're unlikely going to assume that she's a super defensive character and she doesn't really have any defensive-based abilities. You wouldn't likely assume she could pull out a barrier like Reinhardt or start deflecting like Genji. Or throw up a bubble like Zarya. Since you can see the cybernetic parts of her body, such as her joints, her leg jets, her back jets, and her forearms have a bunch of seams kind of all over the place, like interlocking panels, you could assume that her arm might transform or change shape. It might open up to reveal something. She does have the disruptor shot ability that comes from one of her arms, where her hand kind of folds down and then her forearm opens up. Some characters within fiction, even within Overwatch, do have cybernetics on them, but since they're not made of interlocking panels, or attention isn't drawn to them, you wouldn't assume that it could transform, rather that cybernetic is more like a prosthetic instead. It's simply just replacing a limb that was lost. All in all, Vivian is associated with bursts of speed, damage, and a practical mindset, along with a cybernetic body that transforms to aid her role.
Orders, Captain?
Stay on the comms. We've got a city to save.
For the second of the three characters, we're going to look at Emre, starting with the color palette. It's quite similar to Sojourn's, but it differs in some regards. His palette is mostly a dark, pretty close to black, I think it's like a rubber material almost by the looks of it, bodysuit thing. Then he has a near equal amount of beige and a slightly desaturated red on many parts of him. His hair is also brown, which makes sense with his ethnicity, as well as it does add to his earthy tones. He also has a bit of dark silver metal on parts of him, which act to break up parts of the design and add visual variety without drawing any significant attention to anything. The red on Emre for sure draws your attention to certain aspects of his design, much like how Sojourn's does, as the other colors on him are rather mundane. In general, the red is focused on his upper half. A larger focus on the upper half of a body typically invokes more masculine qualities, and more like a character can throw a lot of weight around rather than run or jump around. Compare Tracer to Reinhardt, upper versus lower half focus. Granted, Reinhardt's upper half focus is from his silhouette, Tracer's lower half focus is actually from her color palette.
Get back and protect your team!
Ah, they're just slowing me down! Ah! Besides, they're fine!
He has a big red eye on his chest that's always looking around and stuff. It's making funky noises, and his scarf shares a pretty similar color to it. He does have that red that's on his scarf in some other small parts around his design, but not in any significant amount, so your attention isn't really pulled to it. The eye is a bit more saturated in color, so it has a bit more focus there, because his augmentations are part of his character, gameplay, and design. When he uses his ult and his cybernetics, he does turn orange, and it's kind of like a black color too. Orange is associated with change and stubbornness. In this case, the orange is likely to be associated with a change of his form from human to augmented. The artists may also be using orange too, since it's an opposite of blue, which Echo has on her. Within the lore, Echo was made because of Aurora, I believe the first sentient Omnic. I'm trying to remember my Overwatch lore here, I may be wrong. Aurora basically has always been associated with blue. Aurora's sacrifice also led to the Omnics seeking enlightenment with the Iris. That is Zenyatta and Ramatra's whole shtick. As well as Echo is white and this very light blue. Emre is kind of this black and orange. So it's a completely mirrored color scheme. We kind of have the dichotomy of the blue eye and the orange eye, so maybe I'm reading too far into this, but I think it may be safe to say the dichotomy is crazy. Much like Sojourn, Emre's colors tell us that he's rather bland and practical, but with a hint of danger and a bit of more brooding to him. It's those browns and beiges mixed with black and red. To me, it kind of reminds me of another color scheme from a different character, and that character just so happens to rhyme with Tayson Jod. The lack of any really friendly or bright colors tells the viewer that he may be morally dubious. Next, we'll look at his physique and the physicality of his design. Much like Sojourn, he's made of mostly triangles with a decent focus on the organic shapes of his body. His gun also has many hard angles and triangles in it, making it look quite a bit artificial, as well as it has no significant focus put on his rifle. It isn't overly large, nor does it have any large amount of signifying color on it. It's just kind of beige and black with a bit of red on the screens and highlighting colors. His hair is even a bunch of pointy shapes and triangles. Even his knee pads have lots of triangles on them if you actually look at them. Emre also interestingly does, if you've seen some of my other videos, have the category of resting bitch face known as a lethal face card, which is characterized by naturally furrowed eyebrows, upturned and narrowed eyes, and a resting frown. And he doesn't seem to move his face away from those positions all that much. Characters with faces like these come off as less sociable and more prone to violent and sometimes sexual behavior. Depending on how he would hold himself, he could come off as very sexy if he wanted to. Since he isn't heavily armored, you wouldn't associate a defensive playstyle with him. He's generally athletic and quite tall. Since his suit is form-fitting, it shows off his legs quite a bit too. So you could assume he has a bit more physical capability with him there, especially like in his leg region, like I said, since it's a bit more exposed. Much like how Tracer has exposed legs. Telling someone that, oh yeah, Cassidy springs up into the air is a bit harder to believe than, oh yeah, Emre springs up into the air. You might believe me if I told you that. His body is also noticeably augmented, but in a different fashion to Sojourn. His modifications seem like they were adaptive or bolted into him, while Sojourn's seem more integrative or fully replacing parts of her. Vivian seems more organic and smooth, while Emre's seem more aggressive, invasive, and harsh. Sojourn seems like she would need little changes to have a normal life with her body, while Emre looks like he'd need to fully remove the augments or be stuck as a living weapon.
What have you become?
Freya, just hear me out. Please.
Emre's scarf is also made up of cables that look like power cables for a computer. Sombra and Zarya do have some of these design elements in their clothing and hair too, and this design element links them back to technology. This scarf also helps give him a pretty unique silhouette too. His base stance is not as low down as Sojourn's, but not as upright as someone like Ramatra, so the amount of maneuverability he has could be assumed to be somewhere in between Sojourn and Ram, of maybe he could run a bit faster, maybe he could jump a bit higher, but he's not going to be the same kind of stalwart, physically intimidating stature that Ram has, nor is he going to have that springboard-esque play style that Sojourn has. He also has seemingly flat rubber-bottom shoes part of his bodysuit, which are rather practical, like a hiking boot, so he doesn't have high heels like Widowmaker, so you would likely assume this guy could get a lot more done physically rather than someone like Widow, who doesn't really, besides the grappling hook, she doesn't have really any movement-based ability. All in all, Emre has a design that immediately comes off as a semi-maneuverable character in the damage role without a major focus put on any really main one part of his body, although his invasive cybernetics and technological designs and brooding color palette help him be better understood as a living weapon. Now we'll take a look at the final character of the three for this video. Like the others, we'll start with the color palette. His noteworthy color is a desaturated red like Emre. He's also got a super desaturated and low in value brown, a lighter brown, some gray pants, silver on his chest, and a white prosthetic plated arm. He's got a sparsely used blue that acts as a light to his technology, but that, again, doesn't draw attention to anywhere, it's just kind of the nice accent color. His hair is also brown, which contributes to that rough and tumble dirt vibe he has going on, as well as his palette would be completely different if he were blonde, a ginger, or had black hair. He also has a bit of gold within his design, found in his belt buckle and on his hat. This gold, like Emre's silver, adds a bit of visual interest to break up the monotony and to add some flair and style while not being the focus of the design. Ash has gold on her too, but it's a lot more apparent and it comes off as far more regal and far more stylish than Cass's.
You promised you'd write.
Well, Ash. I've been kinda busy.
Nothing really pops with his design that grabs your attention immediately, besides maybe his poncho and maybe his prosthetic arm, but the poncho hides his arm in his default stance, so again, it doesn't draw attention to it. It's like they're counteracting each other. The arm also doesn't really have anything special going on behind it. It doesn't look like Sojourn's transforming arm, it doesn't look like Junkrat's peg leg, and it doesn't look like Emre's invasive implants. It's just kind of there, and it gets the job done. It's not the focus, it's basically just a prosthetic. The palette doesn't really scream anything to the viewer either. He's a practical, slightly stylish, cyborg cowboy that's maybe associated with danger, again since he is in the damage role. That's why I grouped all these characters together.
Here it comes.
Then we've got his design and physique. He doesn't really have anything emphasized on him. You could make a case that his forearm on his right arm is emphasized because it's exposed, but Cassidy is somewhat tan, so it blends with the fabric and glove. So again, it just kind of contributes to the rough and tumble dirt vibe. He does have some triangular shapes on him and his design, but they're a bit less common and less focused on. Found in his knee pads, the corners of his poncho, his midsection a bit, mimicking the shape of his abdominal muscles, and somewhat on the items adorning his hat. He does have a couple more square shapes going on with his design though. He's covered in more clothing and a bit of armor plating compared to the previous two characters. Upon seeing this, you would likely associate a slightly less mobile playstyle when looking at him. His stance and the way he moves is that he really moves at his own pace. I would use even the word suave to describe him. He also has a bandolier of grenades, flashbangs, I honestly forget what they are at this point, on the left side of his character. And in his base stance, he does hold himself in a way that would give him quick access to them. We also do associate cowboys with quick drawing and such, so you could guess that he could whip those things at you like pocket sand, if need be.
Hold up now.
All in all, Cassidy is supposed to convey a cyborg cowboy. That's the main thing you're supposed to get from his design, and that he's sure in the way he holds himself, and that he could for sure handle himself if things go sideways. As a final little chunk of this video, we'll go over some neat little details about the characters. Emre and Sojourn have first-person animations that reek of practicality in the way they hold themselves. They both reload in a very efficient manner, like they're very familiar with their weapons, while Cassidy adds a bit of satisfying flair to his with the revolver twirl. Both Sojourn and Cassidy punch with their cybernetic limbs, as a chunk of metal to your face is probably going to hurt a lot, while Emre uses the stock of his gun since his hands still seem to be mostly flesh and bone. The buckle on Cassidy's belt actually stands for badass motherfucker. Cass is also voiced by Matthew Mercer, a pretty famous voice actor for those who didn't know.
I was looking forward to showing you America.
One of Cassidy's highlight intros has his face stretch really far, and you're not supposed to see it because it should play at full speed and you're unlikely to actually pause it when he does that. And one critique I do have with the redesign of Cass with his Overwatch 2, or I guess non-Overwatch classic design now, is I wish they kept more of the real fabric from his poncho instead of the techno one it has now. I liked it because it felt a little more personal to him and like it was a couple years old or it was lived in, and now it's just kind of a techno poncho and it seems like he could get that thing off an assembly line and it doesn't feel like it's personal to him, you know? Emre's sidearm also has a bunch of needles in it to pump him full of something, but his pistol does siphon healing to him when he does damage with it, so that's how it does it. This also contributes to the whole invasive cybernetic vibe he has going on. Emre is actually the first male damage hero added to Overwatch since 2017 if you count Doomfist. He is setting a new trend, so let's all give him a round of applause for that. With that, that is the end of this video of breaking down designs. For the next one in this series, I may do the cast of Hi-Fi Rush, the cast of, I don't know, the cast of something, or Zenyatta and Ramatra for the next installment. With that, take care, guys.
That was a smooth ride.